Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Winter Inside, Releasing the Invincible You. This is lesson 8 in a series of 26. We covered 2 lessons last week, 6 and 7, and we had a great time with it. And I certainly enjoyed, and hope you did as well, the week's exercises of training our minds to be able to visualize the things we want and need. So this evening, what we're going to do in this lesson, you may you're going to find that you may freely choose what you think, but the result of your thought is governed by an immutable law. you know uh, think about that. Isn't that a wonderful thought? Isn't it wonderful to know that our lives are not subject to caprice or variability of any kind, that they're governed by law? you know the stability, that type of stability is our opportunity, because by complying with the law, we can secure the desired effect with an invariable, in other words, no variation, precision. It's the law which makes the universe one grand skein of harmony, if you would. If it were not for law, the universe would be a chaotic place, to say the very least, instead of, and would be utter chaos instead of a cosmos, if you would. So herein is the secret of the origin of both, you know, good and evil. You know, this is all the good and evil there ever was or ever will be. Let me illustrate. Thought results in an action, and if your thought is constructive and harmonious, the result will be good. If your thought's destructive or inharmonious, the result will almost 100% of the time be bad or evil. It is therefore then that there's only one law, one principle, one cause, one source of power, and good and evil are simply words which have been coined to indicate the result of our action, of our compliance or non-compliance, as you would, with the law. Now, the importance of this is well illustrated, and I guess probably Emerson and Carlyle. Emerson loved the good, and his life was a symphony of peace and harmony. Carlyle, on the other hand, hated the bad, and his life was a record of perpetual discord and inharmony. I'm sure you've known people in your lifetime that way, that loved the good life, the purity of life, the godliness of life, if you would, and it seemed that they were always peaceful and harmonious. And then you saw people that lived a chaotic life, that was always depressed or angry at the world or at others, or in discord or disharmony with their surroundings, or less fortunate in such a way that it seemed that nothing ever good came of them. Well, in Emerson and Carlyle, we have two grand men, each intent upon achieving the same idea. But one makes use of the constructive thought, and he's therefore in harmony with natural law. And the other makes use of destructive thought, and therefore brings upon himself all kinds of discord of every kind and character, because we know that the world within regulates the world without. So it's evident, therefore, that we're to hate nothing, not even the bad, because hatred is destructive. And we'll soon find out that by entertaining destructive thought, we're sowing the wind and in turn reap the whirlwind. So in part 8 tonight, I'm going to cover several things. Thought contains a vital principle because it is the creative principle of the universe, and by its nature will combine with other similar thoughts, so to speak, like thoughts gather themselves together. You know, as there's one person, there's a purpose of life. The whole purpose of it is growth. All principles underlying existence must contribute to give it effect. Thought, therefore, takes form, and the law of growth eventually brings it into manifestation. The one good thing that we have is we may choose freely what we think, but the result of our thoughts are governed by an immutable law. Any line of thought that you persist in cannot fail to produce its result in the character or the health and circumstances of you as an individual. There are methods whereby we can substitute habits of constructive thinking for those which we have found produce only undesirable effects, are therefore of primary importance. So as we've been studying throughout these past few weeks, we realize that what we think is what we're going to be. And if that's a negative thought, then we are definitely going to have negativity returned to us from all around us. We all know that this is by no means easy, and mental habits are difficult to control, but it can be done. And the way to do it is to begin at once to substitute nothing but constructive thought for the destructive thoughts that we've been having all of our life. If necessary, we have to form a habit of analyzing every thought. And if its manifestation in the objective will be of benefit, not only to us, to ourselves, but to all whom it may come in contact with or affect in any way, we have to keep it and treasure it. Its value. It's if you would, it's in tune with like the infinite. It will grow and develop and produce fruit over and over again. So what that should tell us is that our thoughts throughout time manifest other thoughts. So if the thought is good, then it will bring its like kind to it, draw into it, and manifest itself in a purposeful and productive way, and that it will also gather other good thoughts to it. So, on the other hand, it'd be well for you to keep a quotation that I'm going to give you to think about. And keep this in mind. George Adams said, learn to keep the door shut, keep out of your mind or out of your office and out of your world every element that seeks admittance with no definite helpful end in view. What is he really saying here? He's telling us to close out those negative thoughts and non-productive thoughts that are never going to be of any value to ourselves, to those that we surround ourselves with us, in our business lives, and in the world that we live. Every thought that tries to enter our mind and has no definite purpose then would have to be against the law, right? We think of law as something that man sets in place, but we also know that nature, by its very existence, has a law of its own, and the law of nature is immutable. It's always present. And if we stopped and thought about that for a period of time, and we were to think of the little things that we do each day that uh, hold us back from being all we want to be, that one negative thought that bounces out of us, if you would, that presents itself in such a subtle form, even like to be angry at someone while you're running down the road because they may have cut you off. It's just a non-productive environment, a non-productive environment that we need to just press away from us. You know, if your thoughts has been critical or destructive and has resulted in any condition of discord or inharmony in your life, it may be necessary for you to cultivate a mental attitude which will be conducive to constructive thought. The imagination that you have will be found to be of great assistance in that direction. The cultivation of the imagination leads to the development of the ideal out of which your future comes to you. Now, let me repeat that. The imagination you're going to find will be your greatest assistance in the direction, and the cultivation of it will lead to the development of the ideal out of which your future will emerge. Your imagination gathers up the material by which the mind weaves, if you would, like a fabric in which your future is to be clothed. So if you had positive thoughts in your imagination and combine them with positive actions and weave them together, then wouldn't we automatically we could have the highest expectation of a return of a good result? Because as we know, it's not the world without that controls, which is only the effect of the mind. It's the world within that creates the cause. You know, imagination is the light by which we can penetrate new worlds of thought and experience. Uh, think back when you were a child and you let your imagination run wild and you played games, whether it was for the girls, maybe dolls, and you had little imaginary friends and stuff of that nature, or for the guys, maybe it was playing army or cowboys or whatever it was. But we always had a vivid imagination of the things that we wanted to become. You know, imagination's a mighty instrument by which every discoverer, every inventor out there opened the way from precedent to experience. Precedent said it can't be done, and experience said it is done. Imagination is like, if you would, a plastic power molding the things of sense into new forms and ideals. Imagination is a constructive form of thought which must precede every constructive form of action. If you imagine something evil, then would you assume that there's going to be an evil reaction? If you imagine something positive, then there's going to be a positive reaction in as it feeds back to you. You know, a builder can't go out and build a structure of any kind until he's first received the plans from, like, the architect. And and guess what? The architect gets them from his imagination. He visualizes and sees this building, and the builder then takes that plan that the architect has drawn up, and he goes out and boom, it's created. You know, so to speak, the captain of industry cannot build a giant corporation which where you can coordinate hundreds of smaller corporations and thousands of employees and utilize millions of dollars of capital until first he has created the entire work in his imagination. Objects in the material world are like clay, if you would, in a potter's hand. It's in the master's mind that the real things are created. And it's by the use of our imagination that the work is done. In order to in order to cultivate the imagination, you have to exercise it. And exercise is necessary to cultivate our mental prowess, if you would, or our mental muscle, as well as our physical being. It, it must be supplied with nourishment or it can't grow. So if our imagination is non-productive, then we're going to see a non-productive return. But if our imagination is productive and positive and stays within the laws of nature, then it's going to return to us in like kind, because that's first we form it, then we visualize it, then we put it into motion, and then it returns to us based upon what went out. So what we put out is what we're always going to get back. And I know sometimes we say to ourselves, well, why me? Or why, I try to do everything nice for people. I try to be good to others. I try to live a wholesome life. Well, let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought about the fact that for every good thought you have a bad one? Have you thought about the balance of nature? Have you thought about the balance of the world you live in? How, in order for it to stay in harmony, there must be an equal balance. Life is a balancing act at very best. And I'm sure all of you would agree that, think back to the times when life was good. And maybe like you had a great day and you won a promotion or you got a raise and you were on a high and you were elated by the events that had occurred to you that day. But then you went home to perhaps your significant other, your spouse, and they had a rough day because maybe the children had misbehaved, or the cat tore the curtain down, or the washing machine failed to work. So they were on a low. So we share our high, and it's met with the low. And life is the same way. It always creates a balance. There's checks and balances. So don't confuse imagination with like fancy or that form of daydreaming in which some people like to indulge. Daydreaming is a form of mental dissipation, which may lead to mental disaster. Constructive imagination means mental labor. Now think of that. Constructive imagination means mental labor. By some by some considered to be the hardest kind of labor. But if so, it yields the greatest return. For all the great things in life have come to men and women who had the capacity to think, to imagine, and to make their dreams come true. You know, when you become thoroughly conscious of the fact that mind is the only creative principle, that it's actually omnipotent, omniscient, and ever present, omnipresent, and that you can consciously come into harmony with all of that omnipotence through your power of thought, that's when you've made a giant step in the right direction. Now, the next step is to place yourself, pardon me, in a position to receive the power. You know, as it is omnipresent, it must be within you. We know that this is so because we know that all power is from within, but it must be developed, unfolded, if you would, cultivated. And in order to do this, we must be receptive, and that receptivity is acquired just as physical strength is gained by exercise by, a bodybuilder or something like that. Well, our mind is nonetheless the same. It has to be built and strengthened in order for things to develop and unfold and to become cultivated. The law of attraction will always, certainly, and unerringly bring to you the conditions and environment and experiences in life that correspond directly with uh, your habits, your character, your predominant mental attitude. Not what you think once in a while when, like, you're in church or just read a good book, but the predominant mental attitude is what counts. We can all have a fleeting moment of happiness or a fleeting moment of sadness. It's what we think in the inside of us in a permanent sort of way, if you would think of it in that kind of light. You can't entertain weakness. Give me 1 second here. Or harmful or negative thoughts for like 8 or 10 hours a day, and then expect beautiful things to happen. Strong and harmonious conditions by 10 minutes of strong and positive creative thought. Now, what I said there through all of that coughing is we can't think weak and harmful negative thoughts the majority of our day and expect it to bring about beautiful, strong, and harmonious conditions by then just jumping over here and saying, I would like to be rich, and I deserve to be rich, and I want to be rich, and the universe owes it to me to be rich, and so therefore I am. You can't do that. It doesn't work that way. It's not 10 minutes of good for 10 minutes of good. It's the whole picture. It's the whole mental attitude that we have deep within. Real power comes from within us. Excuse me. All power that anybody can possibly use is within man. It's only waiting to be brought into visibility by first our recognizing it, and then us believing it, affirming it, and then working it into your consciousness until you become one with it. People say that they desire abundant life. I hear this all the time. Oh, I would love to be rich. Oh, I'm going to do these things. And so they do. People say, I want abundance. And I'm sure you do. But so many people interpret that to mean that if they'll exercise their muscle or breathe scientifically or eat certain foods in certain ways or drink so many glasses of water every day or just live at a certain temperature, keep out the drafts, if you would, that they'll attain an abundant life that they seek. But let me tell you, the results of such methods is but indifference. However, when man awakens to the truth and affirms his oneness with all life, he finds that he takes on, if you would, like the clear eye, the elastic step, the vigor of youth. He finds that then and only then he's discovered the source of all power. All mistakes are but mistakes of ignorance. Knowledge gaining and consequent power that comes from it is what determines our growth and evolution. The recognition and demonstration of knowledge is what constitutes power. And this power is a spiritual power, and this spiritual power is the power which lies at the heart of all things. It's, if you would, the soul of our universe. This knowledge is the result of man's ability to think. So, if you would, thought is therefore the germ of man's conscious evolution. When man ceases to advance his thoughts and ideas, then his power, his forces immediately begin to disintegrate. It's, so to speak, a saying that I say, I would rather be going one step backward or two steps forward than I would to be sitting still. Because although still water runs deep, it also stagnates by standing still. So the knowledge that is unused, such as, go back and think about going to primary school or grade school. And then you got into junior high or high school or a higher level of education. And then you got into what they would call the high school. And think about the repetitiveness throughout the different grades of how they would teach us one year. We would implement it the second year, and it would be like a repeat. And then the third year, we would learn something new. And the fourth year would be like a repeat. Well, when we stop and think about that, our mind is mapped in the same way. We have to put the knowledge in, and then we have to practice that knowledge to give it strength, to give us the inner wealth and time to, if you would, I guess, believe it within. A thought that is heard that is never acted upon is nonetheless a thought. But how could it be productive? And that's why I say all mistakes are just mistakes of ignorance. That knowledge gaining and learning and the consequent power is what determines our growth and how we evolve in the environment we're in. The recognition and demonstration of knowledge is what really constitutes that power. And the and as I said, that power is a spiritual power. It's a spiritual power is the power which lies in here at the heart of all things. It's the soul of the universe. Knowledge is the result of our ability to think. Thought is therefore our base for man's conscious growth and evolution. When man ceases to advance in his thoughts and ideas, then he immediately begins to disintegrate. And his countenance gradually registers those changing conditions. Think about the person you may have known in your lifetime that was had so very much and then fell from grace through whether it was alcohol or drugs or loss of his family or loss of a loved one or loss of a job, and they just closed out life. They just closed themselves away from anything good. And think of how their life gradually just disintegrated until one day they were distraught, depressed, had nothing but disharmony and discord in their life. They had no hope. They didn't care about any growth any longer. I think the greatest disaster of all time has to be a life that has been wasted, a life of goodness and creative thought, of a passionate imagination and positive ideals that is lived in harmony with the universe, that is practiced on a daily basis, glorifies our Creator and the universe in general. So it stands to reason that each day as we enter into the world, we need to be beacons of light. We need to be that harmony that we desire. We need to think those creative thoughts that we want to come back. We need to be positive about our attitudes and our passions, and that we need to work at that to keep other things from entering in, so that the generated return coming back is laser focused by the way we put it forth. Remember I said, and I can't agree more with Deepak Chopra, that the laws of karma are nothing more than the laws of cause and effect. Everything we say, everything we do has an effect, whether good or bad. So then we have to realize that knowledge is a result of our ability to think. And it's what's going to cause us to evolve, is that ability. You know, successful people make it their business to hold ideals of the conditions which they want to realize in life. They constantly hold in mind the next step necessary to whatever dream or ideal for which they're striving. Thoughts are the materials with which they build, and the imagination is their mental workshop. Mind is the ever moving force in our life, which successful people use to secure the persons and circumstances necessary to build their success structure. And imagination, if you would, is like a matrix in which all great things are fashioned. If you've been faithful to your ideals, you'll hear the call when circumstances are ready to materialize. Your plans and results will correspond in exact proportion, an exact ratio of your, if you would, fidelity to your ideal. In other words, your loyalty to reach whatever that goal or dream is, your fidelity and truthfulness to it, your purposefulness of it will be there, and the return you get is the return that you sent. So the ideal that's steadily held is what predetermines and attracts the necessary conditions for its fulfillment. So if you want to be rich, then you got to think rich. You've got to have positive thoughts of that you can do, you can become rich, that you will be rich, that richness is already you, so that when the time comes and when you've been faithful to believe it, that you'll hear that call when all the circumstances are ready to materialize your plans. And remember that the result of that will be in exact proportion always to the truthfulness and loyalty and faithfulness, the fidelity of what your ideal was. So I guess then it's thus that you really may weave, if you would, a garment of spirit and power into the web of your entire existence. It's that you may lead a charmed life and be forever protected from all harm. It's thus that you may become a positive force whereby conditions of opulence and harmony will be attracted to you. It's like the leaven which is greatly permeating the general consciousness and is largely responsible for the conditions of unrest which are everywhere evident. Think of that. In the last part, we created a mental image, and we brought it from the invisible into the visible. Now this week, I want you to take an object and follow it back to its origination. See of what it really consists. And if you'll do this, you'll develop imagination and insight, perception, and sagacity, those come not by superficial observation of the multitude, but by a keen analytical observation which actually sees below the surface. You know, it is very few who know that things which they see are only effects, and that even understand the causes by which these effects were brought into existence. So when you go to that quiet place and visualize them, if you would, for lack of anything else, let's say just visualize a battleship. And I want you to see the grim monster floating, if you would, on the surface of the water. You know, there appears to be no life anywhere about. All is silent. And yet you know by far the largest part of the vessel is underwater, out of sight. So you know that the ship is as large and as heavy as a 20-story skyscraper. You know that there are hundreds of people ready to spring to their appointed task instantly. And you know that every department in charge of, if you would, of those able, trained, and skilled officials who have proven themselves competent to take charge of the marvelous piece of mechanism, this battleship, if you would. You know that although it lies apparently oblivious to everything else, it has eyes which see everything for miles around in its radar or whatever, and nothing is permitted to escape its watchful vision. You know that while it appears quiet, submissive, and innocent, it's prepared to hurl a steel projectile weighing thousands of pounds at an enemy many miles away. This and much more you can bring to mind with comparatively no effort whatever. But the thing I would ponder or ask you to ponder is, how did the battleship come to be where it is? How did it come into existence in the first place? All of this you want to know if you're a careful observer. You know, visualize those huge plates of steel as they were processed through the foundry. See the thousands of men and women employed in their production. Now go still further back and see the actual ore, the iron ore, as it comes from the mine. And see it being loaded on barges or cars. See it melted and properly treated. And go back even still further and see the architect and engineers who planned that vessel, who came up with it. Let the thought carry you back still further in order to determine why they planned the vessel. You'll see that you're now so far back that the vessel or battleship is something intangible. It no longer exists. It's now only a thought existing in the brain of the architect. Then think about this. But from where did the order come to plan the vessel? Probably from the Secretary of Defense. But probably this vessel was planned long before the war was thought of. And that Congress had to pass a bill appropriating the money. Possibly there was opposition and speeches for or against the bill. Well, think of whom do these congressmen represent? They represent you and me. So that our line of thought begins with the battleship and ends with what? Ourselves. And we find in the last analysis that our own thought is responsible for this and many other things of which we seldom think. And upon a little further reflection, we'll develop the most important fact of all, and that is, if someone had not discovered the law by which this tremendous mass of steel and iron could be made to float upon the water instead of immediately sinking to the bottom, battleship could have never come into existence at all. This law is that the specific gravity of any substance is the weight of any volume of it, compared with an equal volume of water. Let me say that again. The law that governs that fact of a ship floating is that specific gravity of any substance is the weight of any volume of it, compared with an equal volume of water. That discovery revolutionized every kind of ocean travel, commerce, and warfare, and made the existence of the battleship, aircraft carrier, and cruise ships possible. You know, you'll find exercises of this kind invaluable when the thought has been trained to look below the surface of everything. It takes on a different appearance. The insignificant becomes significant. The uninteresting becomes interesting. The things which we suppose to be of no importance are, how do I want to say that? They're seen to be the only really vital things in existence. I used to say that every deed or action or thought has meaning. If you move your hand in this direction, it has a meaning. If you put your hands together, it has a meaning. Maybe not readily visible to the physical self as much as to the mental image that it creates within. You know, the Sanskrit, I've read some of it, and I'm trying to think in my mind because there's a part of it I want to share. And I committed this to memory, and I hope I put it out right. Look to this day for its life, the very life of life. And in its brief course lies all the verities and realities of your existence. The bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today well lived makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well then, therefore, to this day. I memorized that. It came from the Sanskrit. And I've pondered that many, many times in my lifetime. That Today is the day for me. That the purposefulness and goodness of which I put out today may not be remembered tomorrow, but that it will return to me in its goodness and in its way from the universe in down the road. So the things I think, say, and do now are the life abundant that I'll have later. And that everything I learned and the knowledge that I brought forth from my yesterdays is the culmination of that imagination of my ideals and my character, of my purpose to exist. That happiness is but a well-planned life of thought, of goodness, of thought of purpose, of thought of love and kindness to all that you meet and encounter. We find that so many times it's what we think that makes us who we are. Yet we blame all of our pitfalls and downfalls on that without. I beg of you, look inside of your heart. Look inside of your soul and your mind. Believe in you. Create the life you want from within. Let your actions be a demonstration of that which you desire. Let your hope be in the knowledge that all thought is power and that all thought that is put into the universe must return to you, so let it be of a constructive value. Never idle in life, but rather stay positively focused, passionately persistent to reach the ideals, the goals, and the life of happiness that you desire. For it all begins here, and it all returns here. If it is to be, it is up to me. I'll leave you with that. And I'll leave you with a few questions to ponder in your mind. Question 1. What is the imagination? And what is the result of imagination? How may you cultivate it? And how does imagination differ from daydreaming? What are mistakes? And what is their cause? If you ask that, then what is knowledge? What is the power with which all successful people build? And what predetermines the result? What is the result of a keen analytical observation? And to what does that lead? We've reached the conclusion of Lesson 8 of The Winner Inside, Releasing the Invincible You. I hope you found harmony with it. I hope you'll take those thoughts and go back over this seminar as it's posted for you to be able to come back to. I hope that you'll visualize within you as you go to meditate each day and think and ponder about controlling your mind and body and spirit, that you will internalize the goodness that was given to you when you were created, that when you will grow it into a powerful light force of mental and physical and spiritual opulence and harmony, so that life can be abundant for you, and that your ideals and purposes shall come to manifest themselves in such a way that it will be in harmony with nature's law, and that it will be in harmony with all of your dreams and desires. I'm Dr. David King. Thank you for coming. Good night.